obviously, it is virtually impossible for Ukraine to join NATO in the middle of a war for obvious reasons. But one thing that Zelensky intimated was that by being hazy about a timeline for Ukraine to join NATO, Russia might indeed try to capitalize on that, perhaps by making it part of the negotiations to end the war, saying, look, we will end the war. There will be a ceasefire as long as Ukraine does not join NATO over the next X amount of years. I mean, is that a concern here, the fact that Russia may indeed capitalize on the fact that there is no clear timetable for Ukraine to join NATO?
Right. So I think that there are a couple of big issues here that maybe aren't getting. Of course, Ukraine's not going to join NATO at Vilnius itself, but the objective could be to send a very clear message to Putin that his war is failing, it will fail, and Ukraine will be a member of NATO, so we will have security in the future. This is not only about Ukrainian security, it's about NATO security. We are now suffering, all of us in NATO, paying money, taking refugees, spending all of our defense resources because of Russia's attacks on Ukraine. So we don't want to be in this situation again. So Ukraine must come into the alliance. That's the signal that Putin has to get. If we waffle, and that's what Zelensky's referring to, if we just give another vague statement that is hard for anyone to really understand what it means, Putin will take that as yet another green light to keep fighting.
And you touched on something that I think is really important. I mean, obviously, so much of the focus has been on how, Ukraine becoming a member of NATO would benefit Ukraine. I mean, the list is endless in terms of that. But just to expand on how Ukraine becoming a NATO member would actually benefit NATO, how will it benefit the alliance?
Well, I think tremendously, and there are a couple of different ways. One of them, Ukraine already now has one of the most capable and battle-tested military forces in Europe. Compare that to a lot of existing NATO allies. If you're going to go into a fight, you really want Ukraine on your side rather than even some of these others who have much smaller militaries. So that's one thing. A second thing is that it is the absence of a security guarantee for Ukraine that has caused Vladimir Putin to attack. And this war has foisted consequences on all of Europe now. We've seen it with refugees, we've seen it with energy supplies, with inflation, and it is going to get worse unless Putin is convinced that the days of warfare in Europe for him are over. So it is important for NATO to rebuild security in Europe by bringing Ukraine in. So both from the overarching political perspective and the hardcore military perspective, Ukraine joining NATO is a benefit to NATO.
One of the things that Jens Stoltenberg touched on in the press conference, he was asked this by a reporter, is that the key difference is, if you compare now to 2008, obviously the idea of NATO, of Ukraine becoming a NATO member was discussed clearly in 2008. The key difference is that now they've removed the membership action plan. They aren't able to offer anything concrete in terms of a timeline. Jens Stoltenberg outlined why, but explain to us, I mean, obviously this is not what Zelensky was hoping for here, but explain to us whether or not the alliance could be doing more to give a clearer message to Ukraine about how and when they may indeed be able to become a member.
Sure. So first off, what happened in 2008 was NATO made a promise they will be a member of NATO without any process for getting there. And it said, you're going to have to do the membership action plan, but you can't have it. So it was an empty promise. What NATO's doing now is removing that obstacle of saying you need to have a membership action plan. We can just invite you when we want to. But we still haven't given a process. We haven't said what steps we're going to be taking that are going to accelerate Ukraine's entry into NATO. I understand the point about a timeline because no one wants to go to war with Russia today. We want this war to be stable in some ways so that when Ukraine is brought in, it's not requiring NATO allies to go fight Russia. So it's hard to put a timeline on that. But at the same time, we need to make clear that this train is leaving the station. This is where it's going. We all know it. There is no doubt about it. Right now, we're taking some of these practical steps, like upgrading the NATO-Ukraine Commission to a council, allowing Ukraine into subcommittee meetings, doing more training and interoperability work with Ukraine. But we're not giving it a political context of saying, what does it mean? Why are we doing that? And that has to be clearly stated, that this is so that they will join as soon as we can practically bring them in.
I want to talk about Turkey for my last question, and that is this idea. I mean, yesterday the whole conversation that we were all reporting on was this idea that Erdogan had said, look, the only way, or at least the main way for Sweden to become a NATO member is if there are concessions made in terms of Turkey becoming a member of the EU. He was sort of trying to link two very, very distinct and separate issues. Now we're hearing that Turkey has now said, yes, they will support Sweden becoming a NATO member. In terms of concessions, I mean, there's some reporting that the US is going to be giving Turkey F-16s, but will we ever understand the full price or be given the full idea in terms of the price that NATO allies or the US have paid in terms of what they've offered Turkey for Turkey to change its mind in this sort of dramatic way?
Yeah, well, the principal thing here, I believe, is Erdogan having secured his re-election. He wanted to use this position of standing up for Europe and standing up against terrorism domestically in Turkey to enhance his position as he was running for re-election. Having achieved that, I think he was then back in the negotiating space. Okay, how can I close this out? What can I get for it? He did get Sweden to make a few important steps on committing that they do not want to be a supporter of terrorism. They don't want their territory used by a terrorist group such as the PKK. And they reached a further bilateral deal about that. That's all to the good. The U.S. is now seriously looking at F-16s for Turkey. I think that's also a good step. As far as other things, though, and you mentioned the comment he made about the European Union, I don't think that you can link these processes because they are so different. But it's interesting that Erdogan is putting that back on the table. For years, Turkey has not been pursuing that relationship with the EU, which it previously had done. This is now something he's curious about. It's actually an opportunity for the EU to re-engage Turkey in a more meaningful way.
All right, former US Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker, thank you so much. Always great to have you on the show. Thank you.